Hi there. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to have a conversation with Keith Cappelli.
Cappellini.
Cappellini. Well, I was close. At least I got the cap right. My name is Mike Hebert. I'm a representative in the state legislature. I represent Wyndham 1, which is Vernon and Guilford. Keith's here with me, and he's campaigning for a seat in Windsor 5. Keith, can you tell me what towns are in Windsor 5?
Windsor 5 is Plymouth, Reading, and Woodstock. I live over in Plymouth.
All right, great. Now, is Plymouth Notch over there too?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Birthplace of Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah. Silent Cal. All right, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining me today to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And I know we met briefly a short time ago, but there's some things I'd like to discuss with you and kind of see where you are on issues and what you think what's going on in Vermont. But first thing first, I think the viewers would like to know a little bit about you, Keith, and where you grew up, what you do for a living, family, that sort of stuff. So if you want, let people know who Keith is.
Sure. As if my last name didn't give it away already, I am of Italian-American descent. I'm fourth generation Italian-American. I have a storied history. It all began in New York. My great-grandfather came over. I'm, strong working-class roots. My grandfather on my dad's side was a carpenter. My grandfather on my mom's side was a butcher. My dad was a lineman. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was one of the first early Italian-American pioneers to want to get out of the city in the early 70s when the crime started getting bad, and he moved us down to Florida, which is where I had my formative years, grew up down there with him, hunting, fishing. He had a commercial fishing business. I did a lot of car restoration with him. He had a little business restoring classic cars. I'm the first kid in my, as far as I know, all the family that we know of, the Cappellinis, I was the first one to go to school, to get an education, to complete high school even. And, I went on to college. I got my BA in political science and economics, double major. And I went on to get a master's degree in economic development from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. I've lived in 3 foreign countries. I worked as a reporter abroad in Berlin, Germany. I've spent roughly 10 years as a run-and-gun news producer in Washington, D.C. He was a member of the Washington Press Corps, covered the Hill, the Pentagon, State Department. Been to all 50 states doing stories. I kind of do that on the side now on a freelance basis, and I'm a landlord taking care of family property. Back in New York City there, actually purchased by my great-grandfather 80 years ago for the large sum of $13,900 that he saved as an auto mechanic. So that's a little about me. I'm married. I have a 16-month-old son named Eugene, who's named after my grandfather, Eugene, and we're all doing well over in Plymouth.
Well, that's pretty sweet. One of the things you mentioned was, your mom was a stay-at-home mom. Mm-hmm. And you look at Vermont today, and here you are, you get a background in economic development, and the economics certainly something that could be used in Montpelier. That's one of the things that folks don't have today, whether it's mom or dad, the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom or dad. It's not affordable in Vermont. And I'd like to maybe as we go along have a little conversation about economic development. Obviously, you got a strong background there, and you've traveled, well-traveled, so you got some experience, probably lend some information to folks. It's first time into the political arena?
Yes, absolutely. I've never run for public office before. I've had quite a lot of exposure to it. I covered the 2004 campaign and the 2008 campaign, from beginning to end, and studied political science. I've written about it extensively, and never, always maybe had the thought, that at the right place and the right time I might consider it, and here I am.
Well, I'd like to thank you for putting yourself out there in public service. It's not an easy thing to do, especially with little Eugene at home. Would you say 18 months?
He's going to be 17 on October 4th, 17 months.
17 months. No pictures. What kind of dad are you? Where's the pictures?
Yeah. Actually, I left my phone in the car to be a good interviewee. So.
All right. Well, certainly there's a lot of reasons for you to run with your family and what you see in Vermont. But this particular year, what made you decide, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and run for the legislature? There's got to be a trigger. There's always that straw that broke the camel's back, or whatever. So if you'd share with me why you decided to run this year.
On a philosophical basis, I'm a strong proponent of states' rights, I always have been. And looking at Vermont, I feel strongly that most of the problems we face here, given the dysfunctional nature of national politics based in D.C., I think most of our problems in Vermont can best be solved at the state level. So that's first and foremost why I'm running for state rep. As to why now, probably two reasons. One, after moving to Plymouth and getting a taste of the local politics, figuring out what was what, I realized that my state rep had run unopposed for several terms, no one ever standing up to her, and that was one main reason, just a fundamental face value reason. Another reason is getting to know my neighbors and getting to know Vermont and realizing that things were not doing very well economically speaking, and that there needed to, someone needed to step up to the plate, and I walked into that gap, I think.
All right. So you run November 8th, gonna have an election. You're gonna find out that night that now you are now Representative Cappellini.
Just like the pasta, just different spelling.
Oh, all right. You're now Representative Cappellini. What are the three top priorities that you're going to come to Montpelier with in January that you want to see happen?
I rewind a little bit to what you were touching on with economics there. I think for me, the whole thing revolves around economics, and I think in a very fundamental way, I think in a very developmental way. I did study economic development, and as it applies to the U.S. helping other countries around the world since World War II to develop, and that was always done through industrialization. We've taught the rest of the world how to go about industrializing, growing a middle class, and making a bedrock organic economy from which everything grows. And I think that we've kind of forgotten about that, not just in Vermont, but in the entire nation at large. When we see what's happened over the last 25 or 30 years with the gutting of our industrial base and the offshoring of most of our really good, solid middle class jobs, there hasn't been much to fall back on. And for better or for worse, we have a presidential nominee on the Republican side that's been, harping on the last several months the trade deals that have been passed over the last 25, 30 years. NAFTA, it goes on and on. The Pacific Trade Partnership that they're trying to get through the gates now, but I'm firmly on board with that perspective. I believe that the American working class has been sold down the river, and if we take that. Not in Vermont, but nationally speaking. But if we look at Vermont, and if we look specifically at the region I wish to represent, when you look at the Precision Valley region, which was at one time, anchored in Springfield, the most advanced machine tool industry the world had ever seen. It was a booming economy, and all through from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And Springfield was a place to be, a place to live. Moms were able to stay home, like my mom did in the 70s. People had secure jobs. They made things that they were proud of. I think, running to be an elected representative, I believe that these are the types of ideas that we need to bring to the legislature. I think that something to not look at the strengths of Vermont, specifically the Precision Valley region, what it was, what it could be again. We're kind of selling ourselves short. So why not take a look at that? Why let it die on the vine, so to speak? Obviously there's a lot more involved to just the idea of that, but we have to start somewhere. Looking at Vermont, looking at what's been done in the legislature, it's a lot of top-down type of economic development. True economic development is grassroots economic development. It's growing something. If you develop an economy, you grow your middle class. You have people with money in their pocket. They buy trucks. They buy houses. They go out to dinner. They go see a movie, and it's not a whole lot of Right now we're in the realm of tax and spend. How can we squeeze the Vermont taxpayer even harder to get some more, more money out of them, shake them upside down, get some more coins out of the piggy bank, so we can pay for all this, pay for all these programs and government. if the economy was working as it should, if we legislated as we should, if we looked at things like we should be looking at them, if we tried to change the paradigm a little bit, a perspective, which I think is very important, which I could speak on as well if you want me to. But I think that the path for Vermont leads straight through. It's got to be a bottom-up economic development. I think all else flows from that. Granted, there are plenty of issues that we can talk about, but I think that in order to get anywhere, we have to tune out all the noise, so to speak, and really look at what is the one thing that we can do for Vermont that will make a difference. And I think it's growing the economy.
Well, when you say economic development, growing the economy, that's a very broad statement. I mean, if you look at economic development, grow the economy, we have to take a serious look at our tax structure. We have to take a serious look at our competitiveness with our neighbors. And why are we not as competitive as we could be with New Hampshire, say? And so that opens up a whole lot of conversations. One being some of the recent proposals, or a couple of years ago, the proposal that came but didn't move through the House, thankfully, was the carbon tax. I mean, you talk about hindering economic development. As someone with a master's degree in economics, what do you think a single state having a carbon tax would do to the economy?
I mean, first off, let me say that this is. I mean, we look at agendas. I mean, it's the same as in the realm of. It's been attempted here in Vermont several times by the opposition. Vermont is a small state, so they look at it as kind of a petri dish for these experiments. So if you try it in Vermont, if it doesn't work, the effects of it, repercussions won't be as bad. Oh well. At face value, though, this carbon tax it's just tax and spend jibber jabber. It doesn't. I mean, a regular 275-gallon oil tank at somebody's house, my house, at a fixed price of $3 a gallon, you're looking at like roughly $900 to fill it up. You pass the carbon tax, we're looking at another 300 and some odd bucks to fill your tank. I mean, I'm relative. I know what I make every month, and I know what my neighbors kind of make. I mean, it's unreal. It's beyond the scope of being even realistic. It doesn't even make any economic sense whatsoever. Not just the burden on the consumer. What about the burden on the fuel oil suppliers? I mean, what are they going to do? Well, obviously, they're going to lose business. So,
well, and I think you've struck on something. You, as a young guy, hardworking young man, young family, it would be a burden. But imagine the elderly, the most vulnerable people, what it does to them. You and I, we can drive our vehicle across the river. We could put a tank on the back of our pickup truck and go buy some home heating fuel across the river or in Massachusetts or whatever.
Which is going to happen.
Of course it is. I mean, you see that in Springfield. When you look across the river, you see all the businesses that were in Springfield that are not across the river. I don't care if it's they're selling cigarettes, beer, whiskey, I don't care what it is, clothing, appliances, it's all moving across the river. Yeah, I mean, this is detrimental, but I'm very concerned with the most vulnerable people. The Vermonters that can least afford this would probably be the hardest hit. And when you talk about fuel dealers in Brattleboro, how do they stay in business? And they employ people, and it's that stuff you're talking about, these people buy stuff. And that dollar, if I spend $1 in Springfield, having you provide me a service, and then you go down to the restaurant and spend that $1, waitress gets it, she goes down to Springfield GMC and spends that for a vehicle, that money is respent, that's how you build an economy. If you take that out with a carbon tax, not so much. The other thing that we could talk about is the gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats is looking to implement a service tax, a sales tax on services. Again, as an economist, I'm really interested in talking to you because I am not an economist. And I'd like to talk to people that know how this stuff works. What do you think?
It's completely regressive. They say that they're going to, like the carbon tax will offset the sales tax with it. But if people if I have to take $300 now more to fill my tank, that's $300 less. $300 is a lot of money for me. It's a lot of money for families with more. I only have one kid, and it's expensive. If you get people, like my neighbors, 2 little kids, $300 for them. I mean, they're either going to be not heating their house a lot or burning a hell of a lot more wood, which is not cheap either, or they're not going to be doing other stuff. So a tax on more services, it does the same exact thing. It takes more people are going to go do services less. They're not going to go do services more. So you're just putting a straitjacket on the local economy, which is in any development situation. And even that's just what we did with the Chinese. We taught them through microfinance how to build little businesses, start very small, and then grow it and grow it and grow it through this recirculation of money. And now they have the world's factory. And we're over here nickel and diming our people, not just in Vermont, but everywhere in the United States. It's tragic. It's simply tragic. And it's this stuff, carbon tax, sales tax, it cannot be allowed to pass. People have to understand that there is no positive value to that, other than getting some. It's the piggy shaking the piggy bank.
Well, and those taxes and what. Again, you're in the Connecticut River Valley along the river, and you see what happens across the river. I know in Brattleboro it's hard for my wife to buy a dress or anything like that. I mean, she has to go out of state to do that, either Massachusetts or New Hampshire. So if we do a tax on services, you want to go to your dentist, you're going to be going to New Hampshire. You want to go, hire a plumber, you're going to hire the guy under the table to come over here because I don't want to pay the extra price. I can't afford it. And it's not that people don't want to pay their fair share. They just can't afford it any longer.
Sure.
It's beyond fair. So, okay, so to move on a little bit, I think you've established, I asked you for 3 top priorities, but when you talk economic development, that covers many priorities because there's a lot of things you have to do, and of the things that need to be done in Vermont, that's probably number 1. Okay, educational spending. 2 years ago we passed Act 46. It was supposed to consolidate districts, do a lot of things. If you consolidated the way the state wanted you to, you're a winner. If you don't, you're penalized. It can be problematic. And there are a lot of issues with it. It's a one-size-fits-all concept. So now that it's been in place for a while, a lot of issues are coming up around school choice, around self-governance, different issues like that. Some people have suggested it should be repealed. What do you think, and I'm not sure in your area if you have schools with school choice or not, but what do you think should happen with Act 46?
Well, first I'll say I'm totally opposed to Act 46. I think it's a flawed piece of legislation. I have spent considerable amount of time going to the study groups, both in my town and the town of Reading, community forums, all of it, listened, read through the bill. It's not written for parents trying to raise and educate their children. It's really not. The language that's used is super complex, estimated pupils. I mean, the average person doesn't have neither the time nor, it basically boils down to time. My neighbors that were in the forum with me are all looking at one another. They don't have the time to sit and read through all this stuff. They're really lost as to where this thing is going, where it's driving towards. In Plymouth, we don't have a school because it was voted closed. We do have school choice in Plymouth for that reason. A lot of families have moved to Plymouth over the ensuing years since our school closed for school choice. Through consolidation, it's 85 to 90% likely we'll lose school choice. Reading, another town in my district, they have a 50-some-odd student school. Through consolidation, they would almost nearly 100% likely they lose their school. The property tax problem, the burden of education falling upon property taxes is definitely a problem. I don't think Act 46 is the solution to that problem. I think I'll take it back to economic development. If Springfield was a booming town once again, we wouldn't be talking about closing schools. We would take the burden of education off of the back of property taxpayers, so to speak, if we had more of economic activity here. I think that Act 46, masquerading as it's a for the children, Act for the Children masquerading as a income redistribution bill. What it does to smaller schools lose out in the end. They are, like in the case of Reading, they now get small school grants. If they consolidate, they will lose their own school board. They'll get 2 seats in a larger school board, of which the town of Woodstock will have a disproportionate share of say, because they are the larger school in the new consolidated group. Those grants now come into the overall new consolidated group, and the larger members of said group get to dole out where the money goes. So now Reading School may not necessarily get the grant money that it was used to getting. So,
okay, so let me ask you a question here. So if Reading no longer gets small school grant, that small school grant now goes to the larger entity, which would be Woodstock or whatever,
right.
the new entity. How does that save money? The small school grant is still being paid.
It doesn't save money. It just gives a, in the case of this district, they say, well, we want to do whatever fencing program here, and we say that that's necessary, and we have more of a vote than you do in Reading, and we'll use those fees for that. I mean, this is a very rough, broad brushstroke portrait of how it would work, but that's essentially, small schools like Reading, that's what they have to lose. Good intentioned idea, I think. I think it's flawed. It's a Leviathan piece of legislation that tries it. It's very good for teachers' unions and teachers and administrative costs. Sure, I mean, it does do those things. Another example, in the case of Plymouth, the study group, mountainous ream of paperwork that they produced, and all the groups and community forums, we present on paper a roughly 1,200 some odd savings per pupil through consolidation. Great. However, through consolidation, the current Ludlow busing union would be dissolved, whereby there'd now be a gaping hole in the budget of almost $400,000. So now the towns all have to chip in $30,000 to $40,000 to get their own busing thing, and the cost of the estimated cost per pupil is gone. So what did they achieve through consolidation? Nothing really.
Well, when we were debating the Act 46 legislation, those are the types of questions I asked. Can you please show me where the savings are, or how does this work? Because one of the things they talked about was, well, all the schools could have more services. I don't know how you get more services and not spend money. And one of those was foreign language. I mean, in my area, the largest town offers foreign language in the elementary school. The outlying towns don't. So now they'll be able to offer foreign language. Well, somebody's going to have to pay for that. Whether it's you transporting the kids by bus, the bill's got to be paid.
Yeah, in terms of something like that, I think that in Vermont, we have to be proud of Vermont's a unique place, and education in Vermont is unique due to the rural character of Vermont. And small student-teacher ratios are something that I think should be cherished, because all throughout the United States, that really doesn't exist anymore. And I think there's a positive benefit to being, in a small classroom with, a small group of kids and a teacher where you have a sense of place. The teachers, the kids know everybody in the community. Like, you go down to Reading School, you walk into the auditorium, the kids have a mural that they've drawn. Here's the old stone house, here's the church, here's the ducks. That's unique about Vermont. It's not something we should dismantle because we're trying to save money. Obviously, it's a problem of finance, but we're actually disadvantaging our kids, I believe, by trying to rubber stamp Vermont with this big city model. It's proved not to work everywhere else. So why do we want to try it here?
Well, it'll severely alter our culture, that's for sure. Now, another issue that's come into play, and it's been around for a little while. I don't know if you've heard of it or not. It's Vermont Health Connect.
Yeah.
That may ring a bell. Ever since it's been established, it's been in the news, and it's been a problem, and it still is not working as it was promised to do, and it's been costing us, so far we spent between $175 $200 million on the Health Connect. Again, it speaks to economics, your basic foundation that you're looking at. What do you think the legislature could do with this problem?
This is a huge problem. At face value, there's like 6 or 7% of Vermonters, don't have any insurance. So of course, we want to provide insurance. We want people to be covered and have access to health care. People that do have insurance, due to cost shifting, and a lot of people not having insurance, through cost shifting, the premiums of people with insurance have been going up over the years. So healthcare has become ridiculously expensive. And then there's a lot of doctors that are leaving Vermont because they're either A, retiring, or B, they're just fed up with our system of reform, so that reduces the amount of options we have. The Vermont Health Connect, as a precursor to the now failed dreams of a single payer system, Green Mountain Care, whatever it was going to be, how they were going to finance that through a 10% payroll tax on employers. This goes back to raw economics. It's like the tax on services. So we're going to tax 10 to 13% payroll tax on employers. We're going to tax 10% on non-wage income. So that hits your retirees. So the two people we need most, they were selling the whole thing as it's going to take the burden off of employers. So employers pay zero right now for health care because most of them don't provide it. So now if you have to pay 13%, up to 16%, because the projected costs were supposed to be $1.6 to $2 billion. How does that promote economic activity? If I have a retired couple living on a fixed income of their investments that they have, if I'm now going to tax a 10% rate on them, how is that going to benefit them and the economy? It doesn't make any sense. The whole system is whoever sat down and did it had no idea. There was not a lot of real economic thought behind it. I think there are solutions, and it just involves wiping all of this madness out of the way and like sitting down with a pencil and paper and doing some figuring. It's not.
Okay. Now, another issue, I'm not sure how much it is an issue in Plymouth, but you do have mountains around you and hills. I think you might have a ski area or two nearby.
Oh, yeah.
All the conversation about wind turbines and putting them on our mountaintops and things like that. And the conversations around industrial wind, not so much if, you want to put a windmill in your backyard, it's not 400 feet tall, it's not this, it's not that, it's a home system. The industrial stuff. As you may or may not know, the legislature passed a bill last year unanimously, everybody in the House voted for it, to give local authority more control over siting of these things. Governor threatened to veto it, the bill was watered down, he still vetoed, cost us tens of thousands of dollars to go back to Montpelier to resolve the veto. What do you think of all that?
At face value, I am a proponent of alternative energy. I think it's, I've seen it in use. I lived in Germany for 3 years, and Germany's getting 30% of its industrial power from alternative sources, mainly wind. And Germany's kind of a different animal. It's a country the size of the state of Texas, so they don't have a lot of space. So, generally speaking, you walk around, in a lot of areas of Germany, you see turbines. But, they've done it in such a way where it obviously works for them. In Vermont, we have alternative energy has been promoted here, but it seems to have been promoted at the expense of rationality, and that the people that are promoting it kind of want their cake and eat it too. We want to have all this stuff, yet we don't want it anywhere around us. Let's put it somewhere else. So, that therein lies the problem. I think that there's plenty of room in Vermont for correct applications of industrial wind power, solar power, and I think that it behooves us as a state to figure that out, because I think in the case of like something I was talking about earlier, bringing Springfield back on the line, I think that the investment we've already made in alternative power kind of, and Vermont strides, we're one of the foremost states, for better or worse, in the United States that that has a handle on using alternative energy. Why not take that and combine it with what we already know about having produced some of the best stuff in the world and kind of do what Germany's doing? Germany is producing very advanced machine tools, very advanced medical tools with almost zero externalities, or little to no pollution at all, and powered by essentially the wind. If they can do it, we can surely do it, and that would be quite an economic accomplishment, and it would be something that we could, as a state, market to the rest of the United States and to the world. Look what we're doing in Vermont here. Look what we're rather than shaking people, we can be like actually doing something productive.
Well, I'm going to surprise you here. We're just about done. That's been a half hour. It went by pretty quick. As a final wrap up, you got November 8th right around the corner. You want folks to vote on November 8th for Keith Cappellini? Why? What do you bring to the table besides your expertise in economics?
I brought this little box along with me. I don't know, I'll probably hold it up here for this camera to take a look at. It's what it is a little box of machine tap screws from 1961. If you see it, it's Vermont, made in Vermont. These belong to my father. He was a machinist right out of high school, his first job. And these have been used extensively. They've cut metal for years and years, and you look at it now, you can't even tell it was ever used. And basically, I think all of Vermont's problems can be summed up, and you know, it's all within this little box. I think that, you know, the secret to trying to bring Vermont back to maybe where it was or where it could be lies in tapping our no pun intended, tapping our resources as a state and looking at what we've done very well in the past and not forsaking that. And changing our perceptions as people in a state and trying something new. And I think that if you open the box, it's, you know, it's all full of it's full of great ideas. And like, I would bring those type of ideas to Montpelier, and that's why I've chose to run. And I hope you'll support me in my candidacy.
Well, Keith, it was nice to have met you. Nice talking with you. Certainly look forward to you getting elected and bringing that expertise to Montpelier. And also, the day you get sworn in, it'd be nice to meet Eugene.
I'll bring them with me for sure.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.